Okay, I am trying something a little bit different. I hope the sound is okay. I'm actually recording this on my iPad with some earbuds with a microphone. So hopefully it'll be better. I'll also be able to record my screen. So I have a whiteboard. Yay! See? All right. So what we're going to do today is we have two different things. First, we're going to review what the book calls the chapter synopsis, which is just a fancy word for a review or an overview. So we're going to do that for chapter 10. If you'll remember, with chapter 10, we've been talking about positive and negative numbers. I had to think just a second. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and kind of review over that just a hair bit. And then I'm going to have you pause this while you go ahead and take quiz 8, front and back. And then when you're done with quiz 8, I'm going to have you come back on here and we're going to look at the very first lesson in chapter 11, which is going to be pretty easy. So let's go ahead and look at the chapter synopsis in your book. It's on page 213. It's section 10.9. It says here that it hopes that you've enjoyed a quick tour of negative numbers. The main thing to remember, though, is that a negative sign means the opposite of. We can thus use negative numbers to represent travel in an opposite direction, debt, or temperatures less than 0, force against an object, and so much more. Knowing how to work with negative numbers proves valuable both in everyday life and, as we'll discover more in book 2, in problems where you wouldn't expect negative numbers at all. So here's a quick review of some of the mechanics we've discussed regarding operating with negative numbers. All right, so there's your first one, adding negative numbers. We've added negative numbers, same thing as subtracting positive numbers. Gives you an example right there. Remember that when we call a number, that when you add it to a number it equals 0, we call that the additive inverse. Don't forget that. All right, if you'll look on the next page, 214, it gives you 3 more points, subtracting negative numbers, multiplying, and dividing negative numbers. I want you, rather than me just read through it and waste your time, you can read. So you read through that section, look back over the chapter if you need to, look back over those worksheets that we've done. If you're not sure, if I have yet to check your schoolwork and you're just not really sure about it, then you can, you could email me your worksheet answers. Just make sure you label it. Say, hey, would you check these answers for me right quick? And I can do that for you. You don't have to take a picture of it. Just, email, like, say, worksheet 10.3 or whatever it is. And then say, okay, on number 1, I got this answer. Number 2, I got this answer. Number 3, I got this answer. Would you check that before I take the quiz? If you'd rather me do that, if I have yet to check your schoolwork. But otherwise, if you feel like you're ready, then go ahead and take quiz 8 in your book. Remember, the quizzes are kind of at the back of the book. So you have to find quiz 8 back there. It's front and back. It's pretty easy. I looked over it. It's pretty easy, simple, to the point. The back page has a little bit of skill review. So anyway, if you will go ahead and do that, and then I'm probably going to switch back to something else because now my computer is free where I can use it, and we'll go ahead and start chapter 11 once you're done. So if you'll go ahead and do that, pause it, and then come back when you're finished. All right, so you've taken the quiz. I hope you did well on the quiz. So we're just going to, because we're on the advanced schedule, we're just going to go ahead and move on. But we're just going to do the very first section in chapter 11. So let's go ahead and look in chapter 11. It will be on page 215. I believe chapter 11 is a pretty short chapter, and chapter 11 is a lot about organization. So if you like organization, then you'll probably like this. I guess I could probably erase this. What do you think? Okay, here we go. All right, so we're going to be then talking about sets on section 11.1. in your book. So we're just going to kind of read through this, and I'm going to read with you because I have to kind of stay up, because if I don't use this kind of stuff, I'll lose it. So I have to stay up with you. So I'm going to read. You just kind of follow along and see if we can figure this out together. So imagine for a moment a world without organization. A world where a kitchen drawer has forks, measuring cups, food, and paper all haphazardly mixed together. A world where grocery stores have apples down one aisle, bananas down another, and oranges on the other side of the store. A world where libraries have books with no call numbers or order to their location, just shelves and shelves of randomly piled books. While those are extreme examples, they illustrate the usefulness of organization. Organization helps us function and refer to things. Even saying apple gives us a way of referring to a specific type of fruit, regardless of whether the apple in question is a Golden Delicious or a Granny Smith. We use organization on many levels all the time in life, including in math. Before we take a look at some ways to organize and refer to specific groups of numbers, let's start by understanding the idea of sets and subsets. Now, I'm going to interject something right here on my own. I've been reading through the book of Numbers again, and in the Bible, and in the book of Numbers, it really, if you pay attention, it can really be mundane and boring because it's a lot of numbers with the children of Israel. But if you really read it and you really pay attention to it, and I've read some commentaries on it as well, the book of Numbers shows how God organizes, and he uses numbers, actual numbers in some sets. Thus, I guess the reason we have the name, the Book of Numbers. But the Book of Numbers is an extremely spiritual, organizational book. And so I would suggest reading through it. It's kind of a long book. You don't have to read the whole. I'm not completely done. I'm nearly at the end of it. But anyway, I've read through it a number of times, so to speak. No pun. Yes, the pun was intended. But anyway, I've read through that book several times, and but this particular time I paid close attention to the organization that God had Moses to do. So anyway, it just kind of goes to show that God uses his own creation in the sense of organization. Okay, let's look at sets and subsets. You may have heard those words before. A set is simply a collection, like a group, and a subset is a set that is a further subdivision of another set. We can and often do make sets and subsets of basically anything. If you organize your closet by type of clothes, like shirts, sweaters, pants, shorts, we call each type of clothing a set. If you then proceed to organize your shirts by short versus long sleeves, we call each type of shirt a subset of the set shirts. A further organization within the set of shirts. The beauty, I don't know about y'all, but my closet's not that organized. Just saying. The beauty of sets is that they can be defined differently. Some people might organize their closet by color instead of type, and that's okay. A set is simply a collection. It can be based on an attribute or even be random. If you went into your closet and grabbed a handful of clothes blindfolded, we could call those clothes a random set. Again, a set is a collection. All right, let's look at the next page. So for example, suppose you wanted to organize recipes in folders. You could view each folder as a set. A recipe for apple pie could be categorized under apples, pies, desserts, autumn, or a number of other sets, depending on the organizational structure that you're using. For another example, pardon me, suppose you set out to organize your tools. Depending on your organization system, you might put a specific wrench with all your wrenches in a wrench pile, or you might put it in a pile of plumbing tools. Now, in all the above situations, our collections were of physical items, but sets and subsets can be used to organize non-tangible things as well. When you write a paper, you organize your ideas into logical, hopefully, groups or sets. For another example, we use the term brown-haired to refer to all people with a certain characteristic. That is, to a set or a group of people, even though that set is not geographically located together. Sets help us refer to a grouping or collection as a whole, be that group a physical group or a way of referring to a non-tangible grouping. All right, so that kind of gives us an idea of what sets and subsets are, like what their definitions are, and some examples of those. So let's look at this defining a set. Because sets are used extensively in math, there are whole notational conventions regarding how to express a set mathematically. One way is to simply put brackets around the set or its definition. For example, we could represent a set containing all foods that have apples as an ingredient like this. All foods with apples as ingredients, with the brackets on each side of those. And we could represent this set of all dogs and cats like this. And there's your example of dogs and cats. Now that's defining a set using brackets. Not parentheses, but brackets. Now, I don't know how in the world you might write those other than just like maybe a squiggly parentheses perhaps, something like that. That would be brackets maybe. Now, picturing sets and subsets. Now, have you ever heard the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words? Pictures help us process information, even in math, especially in math for myself. Now, a Venn diagram, those are basically drawings that use circles to show how different sets or collections relate. Let's use them to better understand sets and subsets. So a set. So in Venn diagrams, we use a circle to represent a set. Now, I don't know if you're very familiar with Venn diagrams, but we use them a lot in writing, especially when you're younger. It helps you organize things. So now we're going to look at them in math. So look at the top of page 217. So here we have a circle that has name of set written in it. Okay, so the circle itself is the name of the set. Okay, sometimes I'm reading where it says equivalent sets. Sometimes sets are really just different names for the same thing. For example, pop and soda are both names for the same thing, a carbonated drink. Or if you live in Texas, it's just Coke. Just saying. Everything that could be called pop could also be called soda. If we think of them as sets or collections, everything in one set would also be in the other. We could draw that with a diagram by placing the names for both sets inside the same circle, showing the same item belongs to both sets. So here you have pop, soda. It means the same thing. Now look where it says subsets. As we mentioned, a subset is just a further categorization of a set. So everything inside a subset is also part of the larger set, but not everything inside the larger set is part of the subset. For example, we'll use pies to refer to all pies in general, but apple pies refers to a subset of pies. For example, those with apples. Every apple pie is also a pie, but not every pie is an apple pie. So apple pie is a subset of pies. We could draw this in a diagram by drawing apple pies as a circle within the set pies, thereby showing that everything inside the set apple pies is also a part of the larger set pies. Now, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but the whole set, we're talking about pies. Well, what kinds of pies are there? Oh, there's apple, there's peach, there's custard, there's mincemeat, there's pecan, there's nut pies, there's all kinds of pies, okay? So the main set is pies. So the first subset they're doing is apple pies. So that means any kind of pie that's made with apple would go inside that subset. So for instance, if I said chocolate pie, would that go inside with apple pies? No, it would not. It would go in another, it would possibly go in a custard section, a subset that you might have. But the reason that the circle apple pies is inside the whole circle pies is because all of the apple pies are pies. But not every pie is an apple pie. Does that make sense? Let's flip the page over. Now let's look at overlapping sets. Sometimes sets contain only some items that could be categorized as either set. For example, some desserts are apple dishes and some apple dishes are desserts, but there are desserts that don't contain apples and apple dishes that are not desserts. We could show this in a diagram by having the circles for each set overlap. So here we have a set apple dishes and desserts. See how they're going to overlap? because you're going to have some desserts that are not apple dishes. And you're going to have some that are, and those would go in the center. Now look where it says completely different. Some sets contain no items that could be categorized as part of either set. For example, if we thought of foods in terms of gluten-free and foods containing gluten, a food item could not be part of both of those sets. It would either be gluten-free or it wouldn't, but there's no way that it could be both. So we would draw this by showing no overlapping in both of the circles. So you'd have two separate sets. They would never overlap because there would never be anything that they would have in common, if that makes sense. Let's look at the gray box, a glance at history. Venn diagrams are named after John Venn, whose article helped promote their adoption. Below are some of the diagrams from Venn's book, Symbolic Logic. And there you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are the different types of Venn diagrams that you have depending on the information that you're trying to organize. And I'm not going to read below there. You can if you want to. Look over at 219 at the top where it says keeping perspective. I actually have my eye on that pie, so it's really hard for me to read because I'm looking at that picture of that pie. It looks really good. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read. We use sets or collections or groupings to organize things, whether those things are the clothes in your closet, food, or as we'll see in the next lesson, numbers with different properties. Some sets are different names for the same things. Others are subcategorizations, for instance, subsets. Some sets overlap and contain some items that could be categorized either way, and other sets are completely different. We encounter sets with all of these characteristics within both life and math. Remember, sets are just a way of grouping, whether tangibly or by referring to different things as a group. You use the concept of sets all the time without thinking about it when you refer to collections, tangible or not, such as to a team, brown-haired people, or apple pies. Ultimately, sets are yet another way of naming or exploring God's creation. Only in sets we're naming and exploring by groups or collections rather than individually. And Venn diagrams just give us a way to picture how sets relate to one another. So going back to the book of Numbers that I was talking about before, in the book of Numbers, God had separated the 12 tribes, and there were each of those 12 tribes, were named after the 12 sons of Jacob, who later was named as Israel. So anyway, I'm not going to go all the way to 12, but he went all the way to 12. Well, within those, there were families. So each of these would be sets. And then within those were families. And some of those, they would be subsets. The families would be subsets of those because all of those were from the same family, but not all of those were in, the main family. So anyway, it's just another way of looking at how God organizes things and how we can do that. Anyway, let's look at our worksheet, 11.1. It's front and back. So on part 1, it's just understanding the Venn diagrams. And it just kind of it asks you a couple of questions, and you're going to be using that Venn diagram there at the top. Real easy. Just kind of use your common sense on that. These are all kind of common sensey type things. For most people, for some people don't have any kind of organizational skills at all. And that's okay, because that's just simply how God made them. And then on part 2, you're going to be looking at this really big Venn diagram and just kind of read through it. It's really, really simple. I'm not going to walk through it with you. It's really easy. On the back of the page, you're going to be drawing a Venn diagram. And then on 4, you're going to be grouping. And then on 5, it's skill sharpening. It's just some review of what we've been doing. Okay? Let me know if you need any help on this page. Should be pretty easy. It's just being organized is really all it is. So, but if you'd like for me to work through the page with you, let me know if you need help, okay? And I do believe that is all of the lesson today.